tuned. The show is about to begin.
Hello everyone. The show will begin just momentarily. Until then, enjoy this nice, relaxing music. Man, it's been such a long time coming back and listening to Weightbox and the music. I know a lot of you are, well, first off, hello, Fireside and YouTube, because we're streaming now on YouTube, which don't judge me on how our YouTube channel looks right now, because it's a hot ass mess. Anyways. As the show suggests, this is our farewell show. This is the last show that we're going to do for quite some time. But I have note cards that are going to keep me on track. We'll talk about the farewell and the farewell speech at the very end of the show. We got some things we got to talk about. And I don't know if any of you guys have been paying attention to the news or just in general. But what is it about Texas and Florida trying to whitewash slavery? Like, I thought, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I have been blind this entire time, but last time I checked, I don't recall getting any type of skills from my ancestors who were slaves. I didn't think it was a benefit of them being slaves. Oh, I'm sorry. Texas said it was an involuntarily placement. So we didn't have a choice to come over here. So that's what we're going to talk about. It's two separate stories. They're both generally about slavery, but we're going to talk about the differences because Texas says, oh, well, you were just involuntarily brought here. It's like your boss saying, you're doing overtime, and you're like, I'm not doing overtime. And he's like, yeah, you're doing overtime. And in Florida, apparently we gained brand new skills that are helping us in our quest of freedom. Because last time I checked, I didn't think my ancestors were playing hide and seek when we were trying to run away from slave masters. I didn't think that was a thing. Maybe that's a new skill. Maybe, you know what? Maybe we learned how to play hide and seek. And it was like hide and seek or tag or whatever other. So we're going to talk about that. There has been there's always travel advisories, but one thing that I've started to discover is as I travel this country, and, you know, I'll talk to my Uber drivers or Lyfts or whatever like that. And they're like, oh, where are you from? And I'm like, oh, I'm from Florida. And they're like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, buddy. And I love hearing different people's opinion about what they think about this psychotic state. Okay. So we're going to talk about how we're losing money, but, essentially how even our education system, and how certain colleges, or I shouldn't say certain colleges, but college students are applying outside of Florida, because as I've said before, Florida is a pretty cheap state to go to school, especially once you become a Florida resident. It's like dirt cheap. But now we're looking elsewhere because you're taking diversity out of school. You're whitewashing history to make it like, I don't know, like if you're trying to make it like less bad, you have anti-woke law, right, to not make white people essentially feel bad about what they did back in the day. And so that's primarily what we're going to talk about. I have my own little TED talk. I haven't done a TED talk or I like to call them Steph talks, in a hot minute. So we're going to talk about that. And then we'll get to our farewell speech at the very end of the show. So I'll tell you guys what's going to happen with the show. But this is pretty much the last one. So I know if you're on YouTube, I don't have the other like phone camera thing hooked up, so I have no idea if you're commenting or not. But on Fireside, you're more than I don't know who's down there. I haven't looked yet. You're more than welcome to hop on stage, and you guys know how this show works. So let's talk about Texas, and how we were involuntarily brought over here, and then we'll move on. Sorry, I don't know what that was. Oh, and I have a TikTok from President Obama. He finally sat down. Like, I've been craving. Let me rephrase that because I don't want you guys thinking anything about that craving. I love when he speaks, and he finally talks about all of Trump's indictments. He doesn't go through them step by step, but he does give a very good answer on how the rest of the world is viewing us, right? And I'll touch on that right now. I personally think the rest of the world is probably laughing at us, right? Because we have a former president who is in the legal system, indicted 3 times now. And it's almost like they're laughing at us. And yet he is still able to run for president of the United States, right? Because I don't think any of us ever thought that we would have a president that would go through that. And our best friend, the Green Goblin, said that she would vote for him if he goes to jail. That idiot. So let's, you guys know how I go into all these rabbit holes and you have to stop me before I do. So, Texas. In the latest saga of misguided attacks on crucial racial theory, a group of educators given the assignment of recommending, changes in the education, Texas State Board of Education proposed that American slavery be described to second grade social study classes as involuntary relocation. If the educators suggesting such phrases or phrasing thought they were improving the curriculum, they should know that they're pretty much doing the opposite. Framing slavery as simply involuntary relocation is not appropriate. It's also an egregious attempt to whitewash American history that describes the terror and brutality of slavery. I'm still trying to understand and they said this is to second graders. And when I was in second grade, did we talk about slavery? I think we probably touched on it a little bit, but I mean, it's second grade. That's almost a decade and something ago. But it wasn't whitewashed. It wasn't telling us or whatever that it was involuntarily relocation. Like, how does that make slavery sound? It makes it sound as if slavery was like a game, or it was just something that we did to try it out. Like it was a new outfit that we didn't like, that we bought, we bought some from Walmart and we're going to take it back to the store. And you're making teaching impossible, right? And I tell people this all the time when they're moving down to Florida with younger kids. I tell them, do not send your kids to school down here. It is a huge mistake because your child isn't going to learn. You're not going to learn anything in the Florida education system, K through 12. Your child will be stupid. I'm telling you that right now because of how whitewashed they're making all of education. You're restricting teachers on what they can teach, what they can say, how they can say it, where they can say it. And at a certain point, they're not educators. I've said this before on plenty of other shows. They become glorified babysitters because they cannot teach. Or your school becomes full of stats, like there are some stat-based schools down here. Most of them are in Florida, where it's pretty much just a test. Like it's a test after a test, and you're not learning anything. You're not going to become a productive member of society and understand our rich, terrible history, but you need to know it. So the working group made its recommendation months after Texas enacted SB 3, which required teachers to discuss controversial issues, to explore the topic objectively and in a manner of free from political basis. That same law also says teachers may not describe slavery and racism as anything other than a devotion from betrayals of or failures to line up to the authentic founding principles of the United States. Even so, the working group recommends to call slavery something other than slavery hasn't been well received. The chair of the state of the board said in a statement Thursday that the board had directed the work group to revisit this specific language. Slavery in the United States was far more than involuntarily location, as Miss Williams, associate professor of history at Wayne State University, explained. Slavery is the most basic terms was an economic and labor system focused on maximizing wealth in the production of cash crops, extraction of natural resources, or use of domestic and urban labors. Unlike other forms of unfree labor throughout the history, including domestic slavery in the West and Central Africa, and in adventure servitude to Europe, slavery in the United States, known as chattel slavery, maybe I'm saying that wrong, kept Black people and their descendants in the bondage for life. For enslavers, the economic gain from chattel slavery constituted a greater priority than the actual well-being of enslaved people. As a result, enslaved people had no social, political, or economic rights. They were, for example, barred from owning properties, acquiring literary skills, and developing any form of independent economic power. All that, right? So slavery, I don't know if my phone is freezing. Slavery is, you can't whitewash slavery. I do not understand how, and the reason why, in my head, I think they're trying to do this is to not make, and I know some of you guys in the audience are going to probably comment later, you're pretty much trying to not make white people feel bad about slavery, right? And at a certain point, it's not about making people feel bad. It's about educating people. It's about educating younger generation of, hey, this is what happened, and this is how we grow as people, right? There's still people out there who still look at Black and brown people as property, right? You know? So that's what Texas is doing. Essentially trying to say that it was involuntarily framing slavery as simply involuntarily relocation, discards the terror. So yes, it was, I don't even know. I so many words are going through my head about this. The experience of slavery was brutal and well documented in historical records. To maximize wealth, enslavers attempted to strip enslaved people of their humanity and agency. And as a historian, Jacqueline Jones explained in Labor of Love, Labor of Sorrow, enslavers enacted as much labor as possible through terror, violence. Although enslaved people actively resisted slavery and devised a range of survival strategies, the violence, pain, and trauma of these experiences cannot be overstated. How are you going to explain that to children, right? Without trying to whitewash you. And this here is brutal truth. You have slave masters whipping, lynching, killing, sleeping with African American women because it was easy. They're your property, so you can do pretty much whatever you want. Having mixed children, treating the mixed children different than the other black children, splitting families apart. We had to survive all that. There is not one black or brown person that is going to sit here and say, yes, let's go ahead and whitewash our history because your ancestors will strike your ass down in a heartbeat. It's not about making people feel bad. It's about educating people. So let's move on to Florida, where I am. Oh, these poor bastards. So, as most of you all know, and just do this because this is kind of, there we go. As most of you all know, DeSantis or DeJackass or Degenerate, whatever, as everyone knows him, said that slavery, that as a slave, you gain these skills. You gain these amazing skills. I don't know what skills, because we had to learn survival skills, how to pick cotton and all this other stuff, but it wasn't the way that he's making it seem as if, it was a benefit of being a slave, right? And it's like, well, if it was a benefit of being a slave, then why didn't we have a whole lot of white people down there that picking cotton, since it was such a benefit of being a slave? Tim Scott, who is the only Republican senator right now, I'm not a huge fan of him. I'm not going to go into that right now. But he actually did something I was like, okay, I like you on that part. He confronted DeSantis about it and was like, well, wait, what? So it says that Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, which I've been to, which is a very nice place, said there is no silver lining in slavery. The truth is that anything you can learn, any benefits that people suggest you had during slavery, you would have been a free person, or you would have had to been a free person. What slavery was really about was separating families, about mutinying humans, and even raping their wives, and it was just devastating. I would hope that every person in our country, and certainly running for president, would appreciate that. People have had bad days. Sometimes they regret what they say, and we should ask them again to clarify their positions. He's not doing that. I can tell you that right now. He's not. This is what we are facing, right? And electing someone like this, if you see what's happening here in Florida, it will be 10 times, 120 times worse. As he's out there boasting that, Florida is fantastic, blah, our education and blah, and woke this and woke that. But yet, our economy is dying. Our gas prices are extremely high. Our housing, no one can afford it. You have more and more people living out on the street, more and more people on government assistance. It's not pretty. But anyways, let's get back to this before I get sidetracked again. Part of the reason our country has struggled to become DC Republican all too often, accept false narratives, accept the lies of the perpetrated left. This is what the Jackass is saying. And to, accept the lies that Kamala Harris has been perpetrating and even has been debunked. I'm not even going to read through all that because it's idiotic. Here we go. Learned. So as I said, the middle school students should be taught that enslaved people learned some skills that they later used to their benefit, like running. That's what we used. We learned how to run, ran away. Some of us escaped, some of us didn't. Either way, I don't understand how you can say that we learned new skills as slaves. And as I said, if we learned all these amazing skills, why didn't white people learn them? I would have liked to taught a white person how to run. Some of them can't. I would have loved to teach them how to sing because some of them can. But apparently, we learned some invaluable skills. He hasn't said what skills, but he said we learned some skills. Anyways, that's slavery, right? We're just going to whitewash it, make it seem like it's not truly a part of history, try and sugarcoat it, make it not as bad as it truly is. We're going to keep banning books like Their Eyes Are Watching God, and other books like that. Because, why not? No one needs to learn. Who gives a shit about education? We don't. We truly do not want to educate our younger people. Oh, by the way, about school, luckily, I paid my student debt off. I dropped a nice G&a-half. Oh, Jesus Christ. I mean, you know how hard that hurt my pocket? Like, that hurt so much. At first, I was like, oh, I'm feeling middle class, and I paid my student debt, and I was like, I'm poor again. All right, time. Where's the food stamps? But I did finally get back accepted into the college that I wanted to finish off my bachelor's, or to finish my bachelor's for not. I was about to say secondary education, but it's political science. Because it's. I think the more I do these shows, the more I start learning. Okay, where am I going to invest my money in school? Because I don't want to, be like one of those people who invest like $80,000-$90,000 into their school, and then they start working at Enterprise. And I'm like, you spent how much? And you're working here? Okay, that's logic. So yeah, that's my good news out of that. Anyways, so let's figure out why people do not want to visit Florida anymore. I believe I already know the answer to this, but we'll make it work. So DeSantis, who is vowing to be elected as president, which, Jesus, don't mess with us. Don't you do it. Said he'll make America more like Florida and has championed a wave of extremist legislation in his state. He's targeted the LGBTQ community. He's restricted academic freedom, banned diversity and equality programs, among other measures. Some worry his policies will lead to travelers to take their vacations elsewhere and compel some college students to apply outside of their state for that equal education. They've also elaborated on the stampede of educators fleeing the classrooms in Florida at a time when the state is already facing the largest teacher shortage in history. I have a couple teacher friends. Look at me, not knowing how to speak. And most of them are still currently teaching. It's hard to try and go to a different state to teach, because obviously you have to go through all this other stuff, but they are still teaching. But they have confirmed that there is a huge teacher shortage. Usually you have that 1 to 30 or 25 students. It's getting a lot higher because there's not a lot of teachers who want to teach, especially in a state where you are so restricted on what you can teach or say. According to the Florida Education Association, when DeSantis first took office in 2019, Florida had 2,217 teachers vacancy. As of January in 2023, that number has since more than doubled to 5,294 vacancies in the state where teachers' pay ranked among the lowest in the country. But a hollowed out school force is but only one of the narratives impacted. CNN reported on Sunday that Florida businesses is also taking a fall. I reported this probably an episode ago. Yeah, episode or two ago. I reported how we were supposed to get a whole lot of conventions that's supposed to come down, give us money, whatever like that. And they're not coming. They're like, well, screw you and your politics. His anti-woke message is prompting organizations and corporations to cancel conventions and other events that are essential to part of Florida's hospitality economy. The NAACP issued a travel advisory. They literally do this every other month, Actually, one of my Uber drivers was like, "Isn't there an advisory going on?" I was like, "When is it not? Like when is it clearly not the telling people LGBTQ Black people not to visit?" I said you should visit like Orlando, Tampa, or Miami. You'll be fine. I wouldn't go any other places that you are not familiar with. The NAA issued a travel advisory in May warning the Sunshine State has come to as an openly hostile toward African American people, people of color, and the LGBTQ individuals. The statement was followed by similar warnings at the League of United Latin American Citizens and Equality Florida, a gay rights adversary group advising about extreme policies that travelers from some communities might view as hostile. American Education Research Association pulled its 15,000 person meeting in Orlando after the passage of the Fairness in Women's Sports Act, which bars transgender female athletes from participating in women's sports teams. Game of Thrones, apparently it's a convention. Didn't know that. Also comes on, but they're on the list of not going to. And someone else is probably not going either. Anyways, don't come to Florida. I know Jill and Tony are trying to come down here, and isn't it this month? I believe it's August. You guys are coming down, so come down, visit, and go back to Georgia. It's not the same, but just don't stay here. And Tony wants to move down here too. Jesus. Anyways, so now that I talked about what I wanted to talk about, we are at, man, I thought we would have a lot more time, but I guess we don't. Yeah, we do. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to our, what else are we going to talk about? I forgot. Oh, Steph talk. All right, so let's talk about it. So, as most of you guys know, I judge people a lot. I judge people because it's fun. Hold on, I think someone sent a comment. Oh, they'll be here on Friday. Okay, all right, Tony. See, Chris Rossetti, is that you? I saw your face pop up. Okay, now he's gone. So, let's talk. I think as people, brown, Black people, we need to come to a realization is that we have problems in our own community. And before you jump down my throat or be like, Stefan, you're smoking something, just hear me out. We have issues that we need to fix. And the only way we are going to fix them is if we talk about them. One of the hugest things that I always advocate is for mental health. There are too many of our young Black men and even older and even women who are dying from mental health because they're not seeking help. We have too many of our Black women who are dying from having babies because our healthcare system is shit. Or I wouldn't say that it's shit, it's only shit toward our community. And a story about that is that one of my fellow bus drivers, she was telling me how she had a very, very bad sinus infection. And she went to like one of those quick clinics, something like that. Excuse me. And she said that when she was like, oh, my ear hurts. And the white doctor was like, you'll be fine. It's only like an earache, right? She said she had to go to her a few days later. It got even worse. She had to go to her own primary care doctor and explain what was going on. And they prescribed her medication for it because it had seriously gotten worse. She was like, I can't, it was messing with her breathing. It was messing with her entire body. Like she couldn't move. And so in the back of my head, I was like, well, that's healthcare for you. Because for some reason they believe that we're invincible. My other issue is that the younger generation that's growing up is not I what's the word I'm trying to think of? It's not we're not improving is what I want to say, right? And that's with a lot of things. That's with sagging pants, right? I don't know why that trend's still going on, but it's still cool. I've even asked other like women in the younger group. I'm like, do you find that attractive? Like, why do they do it? You know, what is it? And everyone gives me the same answer. I guess it's a trend. It's a trend that needs to go away, right? And I explained to another young man who got on my bus and he was sagging. I was like, do you honestly think that you are more respected with your pants hanging off your ass than if your pants are up, right? And those are the issues that we face every day. We need more. Is it activism? Is that it? Is that the word? Monica, you're a smart person. Is that the word I'm using correctly? So we need more of that. We need more call to action in our own community, because of the way that situations are going, right? The way that this world is going, we don't know who's going to be in power. We're hoping, it's going to be Biden and Harris, but who knows at this point, right? We don't need people trying to whitewash our education. We don't need people who are going to essentially help racist people become racist again of how they were before. Most of these are just random thoughts that I'm saying, and they probably have no sense to it. But we have to improve as people before we are expecting other people to treat us differently, right? And that's essentially what I'm trying to say is we have to improve. And there's things that we definitely can improve on, all right? Things that we can fix ourselves. Let me give you the first example that comes to my head. Government assistance, right? Now, as most of you all know, I've been poor. I'm not poor now, but I have been poor. I've lived in the projects. I've had my water shut off. I've had to go to the neighbor's house and get buckets of water. I've been there, right? And, with government assistance, whatever like that. But that is a crutch that our community has heavily. We've had that. And it's passing down from generation to generation. So in a sense, we are not trying to get above the government assistance, right? We're not going to school or finding a better job to get off those government assistance. My best friend, who I love her to death, she is one of those success stories where, we pretty much grew up the same way. And she went to school. She became a nurse. Now she's making, she's making killer. And she called me months ago, and she was like, they cut off my food stamps. I was like, oh no. And I was like, well, why did they cut off your food stamps? She's like, I make too much money. And I was like, well, you do. And she's like, mm-mm. But either way, it was an improvement, right? So now she can sustain herself. Another example of that is my uncle. He was on Section 8, which is a housing program, if none of you guys know what that is. He was on Section 8. He got a really good job, went back to school, whatever the case may be. And now in Arizona, you can pass it down to your children, which I thought that's a brilliant idea, to pass it down to your children, help your children. Like, that's their little foundation to be like, hey, this is to get you on your feet. After you're on your feet, then, you can pass it down or whatever like that. But government assistance is probably one of the biggest crutches that we have to be able to get off of and not use it. That means bettering ourselves and getting out of those communities that pretty much people stereotype us in. College isn't for everyone. It's not. There's so many certificates out there that you can get, welding, whatever the case may be. Even your CDL, for God's sakes. People are hiring like crackheads out here. But still, government assistance is probably the first thing that I would say that we need to kind of move away from. So, anyways, that's enough of my babbling. I got one more thing for you guys, and that is Farewell, people. Peace out. That's the wrong one. I don't want to use that one. I was about to use another one. So, as the title says, this is my last show, people. Like this is it. This is last show, and I don't know when I'll be back. So, yeah, that's the big news.